First frontier is whatever is happening air to space, space to air. It's what we know basically as a space sector. Satellites, launchers, GPS, telecommunication, Earth observation, all of that is first frontier. That is today 92-95% of the economy in the space sector. And then we have what is called the second frontier. Second frontier is space to space. It's whatever is happening in the space for the space. And then we have third frontier. That is the moon, Mars, interplanetary exploration, these kind of things. We were already with Archer, we are already working in the space sector.
Why should you care about the future of deep tech investing right now? Because the companies redefining everything from energy to orbital systems are the ones that will shape the next decade of growth. Juan Pablo knows where the biggest opportunities lie and how to spot real breakthroughs before the market does. What founders and investors often get wrong, and about building disruptive companies. Juan Pablo, thank you so much for joining me today. Thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is the problem that you're solving for, and why are you personally motivated to solve it?
We are trying to develop technology and technology that impact humanity in the best possible way. This is something that is coming from my decision to change, let me put it in this way, to change the world as much as possible, to generate an impact. I am a very curious person. I love to do what I do. If you can do something that is helping you to generate the impact that you want to generate while you are creating a business on top of that, I guess that is a dream come true.
Beautiful.
Let me give you a little background to understand what we do. I spent plus 22 years in the corporate world in world-class companies like Baker Hughes, General Electric, MAN. And then at certain point, I decided that the corporate career that these corporations were, let's say, planning for me were not the path I want to follow for myself, for my family, and for my daily business. And then I decided to step aside and do something different. We started doing open innovation and investing in deep tech, what is called science-based deep tech startups, that then evolved to more verticals, and not only energy, climate, biotechnology, but also advanced materials, manufacturing, aerospace. And then we started providing services around the world for fostering and promoting and helping these companies to grow. And then we decided to create a third business unit that is our own, let's say, space tech endeavor, where we are developing infrastructure for providing services in orbit to satellite operators. So this is why I want to always give this small piece of background, because saying that we have capital solutions, strategic services, and orbital systems, sometimes it's difficult to understand, okay, but what is all of that, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's something I'd love to dive into today. So most people think that disruption starts with startups. What do people completely misunderstand about how big change actually happens?
We need to understand that innovation could happen in different ways, different flavors. We have what is called incremental innovation. That is basically what is happening in companies like Lego, for example, that they do small incremental innovations and not too far away from what is the core of the company. Then we have disruptive innovation. That is when the innovation is doing something totally different that you used it to be. And this is what is mostly happening in the startup world. But then between the startup world, we have what is called soft tech and what is called deep tech. Soft tech is basically companies developing software, for example, where the main risk is in the adoption and the escalation of the business and the adoption of the users, but not necessarily on the development of the technology. While for the deep tech, that are mostly science-based technology companies, there is some level of risk in the commercialization, but most of the risk is on the technology development side. Saying this because when we talk about the main challenges that humanity is going to face in the next 10, 20, 50 years, the main challenges like environmental change, climate impact, food, right? Access to food, to the 7 to 10 billion citizens that we are going to be in the planet Earth very soon, mobility, new processes, efficiency, all of those different challenges we are facing, we can tackle that in different ways. One is how we can reduce the need or the challenge of those different areas. But the other is how we can implement technology to make it happen. I believe that it's going to happen a kind of, let's say, merge or mix in between. But on the other side, if we are seeing the really, really hard or difficult to access to change, to modify challenges for the humanity, most of them, if not all, requires deep technology, science-based companies. And this is why we decided to put the focus there.
What is something that is a misconception that Arche is really pushing to change when it comes to assessing these startups and getting to the kind of the important questions?
Yes, that is a good point. I will say that kind of disclaimer. I'm not coming from the venture capital. I am a mechanical engineer. I have my specialization in MIT and work in technology. So when I started in the venture capital world, I understood that it's the way to provide capital to these companies that are developing disruptive technology. The reality, and if you see a very good interview that Koshla did maybe 1 or 2 years ago, unfortunately, most of the venture capital are not providing much value. Maybe 70-75% of the venture capitals are not generating a TVPI, a return on the investment. On top of that, as Koshla said, most of the VCs are not adding any value to the startups they are investing. And this is an issue. This is a kind of, market failure. And this is why most of the VCs is underperforming, should be performing much, much better. So we decided to do that in a different way, as we also interact and we see a lot of VCs and CVCs that work properly on that aspect, mostly in the US and Europe, that they do a hard job looking for the startups, evaluating the startups, doing the due diligence. And once they decide to invest in a company, in a startup, they actually provide the smart money that is very well promoted, but pretty much nobody is delivering. So we are trying to do slightly different. Maybe we do less investments, but are more carefully selected, analyzed. And I learned to do things in that way on my corporate experience. We are not giving money for free. And this is how we try to do things slightly different. Sometimes, on the other side, sometimes our startups, mostly on the deep tech sector, startups understand and value this. And they say, okay, you are the right partner for me. In other cases, startups are saying, no, but this is not how venture capital works. And it's fine. It's actually why we want to work in a different way.
Do you think that the future of venture investing is going to see that we need to have Arche, we need to have that type of that industry knowledge supporting a company in order to be successful and competitive?
Let me put it in this way. In deep tech, in everything related to science-based technology companies, yes. I mean, it's no other way, because you need too much of mentoring, advisory, networking, contacts, because you have a lot of issues in between. The development of the technology, the implementation of pilots, the industrialization, the globalization, the supply chain, the quality, the regulatory frameworks, regulation, intellectual property. So it's super complex to do a deep tech company. So you need companies like us or others that can provide capital or services or both. What is happening in the last 3, 4, 5 years, that is when I was mostly involved on venture capital and CVC, is that the ecosystem is evolving slightly, very slow, but it's evolving. So you are seeing more angel investors coming in, providing capital and advisory and helping and networking. You are seeing more what is called facilitators. That could be, or for example, the business unit we provide services is a facilitator. It is in Europe they call it enablers. So you are an enabler. You help startups to connect with a corporation, to frame a venture client agreement, to design a pilot in an energy plant or a refinery. This is coming more and more, and it's super useful. I guess the ecosystem is evolving to make it better, faster.
That's really exciting. And it sounds like there's just more options, more ways that it can look uh, to find the support that you need, from capital to systems, from angels to facilitators. Do you think that's going to continue to be the case?
Absolutely, and growing. First of all, because you need to see from the demand side, right? This is a typical market pull. Companies need this. So, and this is not going anywhere. What is evolving, the ecosystems are growing and are becoming richer and wider and more diverse.
Yeah.
Tools, things are evolving properly. And it's going to take some time, of course, but the
Yeah.
demand is going to be there at least for the next, I don't know, 100 years.
And tell me just a little bit about the resistance to this, or just maybe the lack of awareness or lack of understanding of how the ecosystem is changing.
Maybe two or three things. The first one is that not necessarily in some part of Europe and United States, but in Latin America, for example, we operate a lot in Latin America. We still see the ecosystem in Latin America, the different stakeholders in Latin America, also the universities in Latin America, kind of lagging behind. They are using recipes of 10 years that nobody is using anymore. So Latin America is a very early, let's say, ecosystem, but needs to move faster because it's lagging behind. Um, in Europe, you have kind of two dependency on the governments still, because Europe is more paternalistic. So you have a lot of government grants, a lot of support. That is okay at certain point, but the startups in Europe are clashing with this situation that they have a lot of support from the government up to certain point, but then Europe doesn't have capital to raise Series A, B, C, D, and then this startup needs to go to the US. And the US, Europe, Latin America, Middle East, Asia Pacific, all those different regions and places has different playbooks. So things that you need to do, proof that you need to show, and these kind of things. So what we are seeing is kind of resistance in the way that there are some regions and players or stakeholders in certain ecosystems that still want to play with that specific rule. We operate globally, so sometimes we help one moving into the other or these kind of things, but we still see a lot of resistance on doing the things in the best way for the ecosystem. On the capital, we see a lot of resistance in the way that as we have the capital, we put the rules. And that is totally wrong. In reality, it's way harder to develop technology or to be in a startup than to be a venture capital. So shouldn't be in that way. There are some venture capitals in the US, in Latin America, in Europe that understand that. And those are the venture capitals that always jump in and say, how I can help you, let me do this, I will connect you with this other VC.
Right. It's been incredible to talk about the future of capital solutions in the venture space. There's one other thing that is a huge part of what you're doing at Arche that we should absolutely dive into, and that is your orbital systems. So tell us first, what are orbital systems?
Orbital Systems is a business unit of Arche, where we are designing and developing infrastructure to provide services in orbit to satellite operators. When you talk about specifically about the space sector, you have what is called the traditional space. That is how agencies, space agencies like NASA, ESA, JAXA, UK Space Agency, so on and so forth, developed space missions up to a certain point. And then you have what is called the new space. That started when NASA in 2001 decided to allocate commercial contracts to put some goods or astronauts in orbit for the International Space Station, the ISS. And then three companies were competing for that contract. SpaceX from Elon Musk, Virgin Galactic, and from Bezos. That contract was awarded to SpaceX, and that was kind of the beginning of what is today known as a new space. On that specific area of traditional space plus new space, whatever, you have what is called the first frontier. First frontier is whatever is happening Earth to space, space to Earth. It's what we know basically as a space sector. Satellites, launchers, GPS, telecommunication, Earth observation, all of that is first frontier. That is today 92-95% of the economy in the space sector. And then we have what is called the second frontier. Second frontier is space to space. It's whatever is happening in the space for the space. And then we have a third frontier, that is the moon, Mars, interplanetary exploration, these kind of things. We were already, with Archer, we are already working in the space sector, and we were having already customers in the new space in different countries. And I did one of my specialization in the MIT was about the new space economy. And we decided to create new business units, not only capital solutions and strategic services, but other business units that we actually design and manufacture and provide something. Taking advantage of all the lessons learned from the investments and from the services. And then we decided to create the first business unit of others that are coming soon in the space sector. And we decided to do it in this approach that is slightly different than others. First of all, it's not a startup as it is, because it's a business unit that works as a startup inside the rest of the company. Second, Archer is the owner. We don't have a kind of three founders coming out from Stanford that are the owners of the company. Archer is the owner of all the businesses. Third, we decided to do it in the second frontier. Everything we do is second frontier. Because the entrance barrier is slightly higher for everybody, maybe not for us, but also because there is way less players on the second frontier versus first frontier. The fourth characteristic is that we decided to do that in a stack of different technologies. So we are not developing a technology that is going to have a patent in these kind of things, but we are integrating different technologies that are more or less available in the market to provide something new for the second frontier. This is basically the recipe for the business unit we are creating, including orbital systems.
Brilliant. What is one real world scenario that could kind of change life on Earth in the next decade?
Well, I will say that what is changing already and is going to have an impact that today we don't foresee is artificial intelligence. For sure, artificial intelligence is changing the life of everybody. If you know it or not, it's a different thing. But artificial intelligence is changing the way we provide education, we provide healthcare, we provide logistic, mobilization, how we plan things. Consider that, for example, we are helping others with artificial intelligence. We are investing in artificial intelligence, but we are also using artificial intelligence to design orbit transfers and these kind of things for satellite operators. All of that was impossible 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And this is changing super, super fast. Now we don't need that many software factories and programmers. This is going to have an impact for the good and for the bad, because in one way, we are becoming more efficient. We can use these tools to do these kind of things. In the other way, as humanity, we need to understand what we are going to do and how we use it.
Right. And where the money decides to flow is going to be absolutely crucial. I want to give people the opportunity to find out more about what you're doing on all of the fronts, on orbital systems, capital solutions, and strategic services. Where can people find you and Archer?
We are basically on LinkedIn. We have some level of information on what we are doing. And then we have the webpage of the company where we have the latest news.
Juan Pablo, thank you so much for being here with me today. It was absolutely brilliant to hear your insights and to really think more deeply about the trajectory of venture capital and, of course, orbital systems moving forward.
Thank you, Tracy. It's always a pleasure, and sometimes it's actually a responsibility to pass the message, mostly for the next generations, right? To do things better.